The White Woman of Gippsland refers to one of Australia's most enduring colonial mysteries. Starting in the 1840s, reports emerged of a European woman living among Aboriginal tribes in the remote Gippsland region of southeastern Victoria. The story gained momentum when multiple Aboriginal people described encounters with a pale-skinned woman who spoke broken English and lived as part of their community. These accounts were consistent enough to convince colonial authorities that she was real, leading to several organized search expeditions between 1846 and 1850. The most detailed description came from an Aboriginal man named Bungaleen, who claimed to have seen her multiple times near the shores of what is now called 90 Mile Beach. He described her as having long blonde hair, wearing traditional Aboriginal clothing, and living with a tribe in the dense forests of East Gippsland. Search parties led by figures like Angus MacMillan scoured the wilderness for months, finding what they believed were traces of European presence. They discovered unusual campsites, pieces of cloth that seemed European in origin, and heard reports from settlers of glimpsing a white figure in the distance before it vanished into the bush. Several theories emerged about her identity. Some believed she was a survivor from the Sydney Cove shipwreck of 1797, whose passengers had been scattered along the coast. Others suggested she was Eliza Fraser, who famously lived among Aboriginal people after her own shipwreck, though Fraser had already been rescued years earlier. The mystery deepened when search parties claimed to find evidence of children who appeared to be of mixed European and Aboriginal heritage, suggesting the woman had been living in the region for years or even decades. Despite extensive searches covering hundreds of square kilometers, no European woman was ever found. The White Woman of Gippsland became a ghost story that captured the colonial imagination, representing both the fear and fascination of Europeans disappearing into the Australian wilderness. The Jackalope economy describes the deliberate creation and sustained commercial exploitation of mythical creatures to generate tourism revenue in economically struggling rural communities. This theory suggests that the famous rabbit-antelope hybrid wasn't born from frontier folklore, but rather manufactured in the 1930s as a calculated economic strategy. Douglas, Wyoming serves as the primary case study. Local taxidermist Douglas Herrick allegedly created the first jackalope mount in 1932, but theorists point to suspicious timing coinciding with the Great Depression's impact on small western towns. The creature's rapid spread across postcards, roadside attractions, and gift shops happened far too quickly for organic folklore development. The economic model relies on what researchers call manufactured mystique marketing. Small towns struggling with population decline and limited industry deliberately adopt or create cryptid legends to draw tourist dollars. Waldrug in South Dakota pioneered similar tactics in the same era, proving that roadside curiosities could sustain entire communities. Financial records from Wyoming's tourism department show jackalope-related revenue streams, generating millions annually through hunting licenses for non-existent creatures, merchandise sales, and festival tourism. The state legislature even designated the jackalope as Wyoming's official mythical creature in 2005, cementing the economic partnership between government and legend. Key indicators include the coordinated emergence of jackalope sightings across multiple western states during economic downturns, the standardized appearance of jackalope imagery despite supposedly independent origins, and the remarkable consistency of jackalope merchandise across thousands of miles of territory. The theory extends beyond individual communities to encompass a broader network of rural economic survival tactics, where manufactured folklore becomes a deliberate industry rather than authentic cultural tradition. The New World Airport Commission refers to a mysterious organization mentioned on a dedicatory capstone at Denver International Airport. This granite marker, installed during the airport's construction in the 1990s, credits the commission alongside more conventional groups like the Masonic Lodge and various civic organizations. What makes this particularly intriguing is that no official record exists of any organization called the New World Airport Commission. The airport's own historical documents and construction records contain no mention of this group, yet there it sits permanently etched in stone at one of America's busiest transportation hubs. The capstone itself displays Masonic symbols including the square and compass, leading researchers to examine the airport's numerous connections to esoteric symbolism. The facility houses controversial murals depicting apocalyptic scenes followed by world peace, underground tunnel systems that extend far beyond typical airport infrastructure, and a 32-foot tall blue horse statue that actually killed its creator, Luis Jimenez, when a section fell on him during construction. Construction of Denver International Airport exceeded its original budget by over $2 billion and faced multiple delays. Workers reported building extensive underground facilities, with some claiming entire sections were built and then mysteriously filled in with dirt. The airport sits on 53 square miles of land, making it larger than Manhattan, Boston, and San Francisco combined. The dedication plaque specifically mentions the commission alongside the date March 19, 1994, and includes a time capsule set to be opened in 2094. Airport officials have consistently stated they have no knowledge of who the New World Airport Commission represents or why they were credited on the dedication stone. The Kaoma River Caverns refers to alleged underground tunnel systems beneath a river called Kaoma in the border region between what was once Tanganyika and Zambia in eastern Africa. Reports from early travelers described great tunnels stretching under Africa, including one beneath a river called Kaoma, Tanganyika, Zambia, so lengthy that it took the caravan from sunrise to noon to pass through. This theory emerged from colonial-era exploration accounts that claimed to document vast subterranean networks throughout the African continent. The Kaoma region sits in western Zambia near the shores of Lake Tanganyika, one of Africa's Great Lakes, and the world's second deepest freshwater body after Lake Baikal. The area is home to the Lungu people and features multiple river systems including the Luampa and Luena rivers. According to these historical accounts, early European travelers encountered local guides who led caravans through underground passages that stretched for enormous distances beneath the African landscape. The time reference of sunrise to noon suggests tunnels potentially spanning dozens of miles underground, far exceeding anything that could be naturally formed. Some researchers have connected these reports to broader theories about ancient African civilizations possessing advanced engineering capabilities that allowed them to construct massive tunnel networks for transportation, defense, or religious purposes. The accounts describe perfectly constructed passages with smooth walls, suggesting artificial rather than natural cave formation. The Lake Tanganyika region adds intrigue to these claims, as this ancient Rift Valley lake system has existed for millions of years and harbors unique ecosystems found nowhere else on Earth. The geological activity that created such dramatic underwater depths could theoretically have formed extensive cave systems throughout the surrounding terrain. Modern conspiracy theorists have linked these early Kaoma tunnel reports to wider theories about hidden African civilizations, ancient advanced technologies, and systematic suppression of African achievements by colonial powers who allegedly sealed or concealed such discoveries to maintain narratives about primitive indigenous populations. This entry refers to the belief that certain rain clouds operate as parasitic entities, artificially draining moisture and precipitation from areas where it would naturally occur. The theory suggests these clouds are not natural formations, but engineered weather systems designed to steal rainfall from specific regions. Unlike normal precipitation patterns, parasitic rain clouds allegedly follow predetermined paths, extracting water vapor from the atmosphere before it can condense naturally over intended targets. Cloud seeding technology forms the foundation for these claims. Since the 1940s, scientists have successfully used silver iodide and dry ice particles to encourage precipitation in supercooled clouds. The process involves aircraft or ground-based generators dispersing these substances into cloud formations, creating nucleation points where water droplets can form more easily. Project Skywater in the early 1960s demonstrated that weather modification was not only possible, but actively funded by government agencies. The Bureau of Reclamation invested heavily in cloud seeding experiments across western states, achieving rainfall increases of up to 30% in some regions. The parasitic aspect comes from the fundamental mechanics of atmospheric moisture. When clouds are seated in one location, that water vapor cannot fall elsewhere. Each gallon of artificially induced rainfall represents precipitation stolen from downstream areas. California's recent cloud seeding operations during severe drought conditions sparked controversy precisely because neighboring regions claimed their natural rainfall was being intercepted. Operation Popeye during the Vietnam War proved that weather modification could be weaponized. American forces extended monsoon seasons over enemy territory by seeding clouds with silver iodide, demonstrating that precipitation could be directed as a tactical weapon. The operation caused devastating floods that destroyed civilian harvests, showing how redirected rainfall creates humanitarian consequences. The United Arab Emirates currently operates one of the world's most aggressive cloud seeding programs, using drones equipped with electrical charge systems to stimulate rainfall. In July 2021, their operations produced over 6 millimeters of precipitation in areas that would otherwise remain arid. Modern weather modification extends beyond simple cloud seeding. Electromagnetic systems like HAARP allegedly create atmospheric disturbances that can redirect moisture-bearing clouds across vast distances. These installations can theoretically generate ionospheric heating that disrupts normal atmospheric circulation patterns. The parasitic rain cloud phenomenon explains unusual precipitation patterns observed in recent decades, where some regions experience unprecedented flooding while neighboring areas face extreme drought conditions that persist despite favorable atmospheric conditions. Airship anchors represent one of the most tangible pieces of evidence tied to the mystery airship phenomenon of the 1890s. These metallic objects, resembling ship anchors but crafted from unknown alloys, allegedly fell from unidentified aerial craft during the Great Airship Wave that swept across America. The most documented incident occurred in Aurora, Texas in 1897, where witnesses claimed an anchor dropped from a cigar-shaped vessel hovering above the town square. Local blacksmith Hiram Wilson reportedly examined the object, noting its unusual weight distribution and the presence of hieroglyphic markings along the shank. The anchor supposedly measured 4 feet in length and weighed approximately 80 pounds, yet Wilson claimed it felt significantly lighter when lifted. Similar reports emerged from Nebraska and Kansas during the same period. In Omaha, residents described an anchor being dragged through Main Street by an invisible rope, carving a distinctive groove in the dirt road that remained visible for months afterward. The anchor itself vanished by morning, leaving only the mysterious furrow as evidence. Physical specimens allegedly exist in private collections across the Midwest. Metallurgical analysis conducted in the 1970s suggested these anchors contained trace elements not naturally occurring on Earth, though these findings were never published in peer-reviewed journals. The objects exhibit an unusual magnetic signature that interferes with compass readings within a 20-foot radius. The anchor phenomenon extends beyond simple dropped objects. Multiple witnesses reported seeing rope or cable systems extending downward from airships, with crew members allegedly attempting to retrieve dragging anchors. In Council Bluffs, Iowa, a local farmer claimed he grabbed hold of such a rope and was lifted 30 feet into the air before releasing his grip. These incidents coincided with the broader mystery airship epidemic, when thousands of Americans reported seeing impossible flying machines decades before the Wright brothers achieved powered flight. Mistpoeffers, also known as Airquakes, are unexplained booming sounds that echo across bodies of water and coastal regions worldwide. These mysterious acoustic phenomena have puzzled witnesses for centuries, creating thunderous roars from seemingly empty skies. The sounds themselves are described as cannon-like explosions, deep rumbling thunder, or massive sonic booms that can shake windows and rattle nerves. What makes them particularly unsettling is their complete lack of visible source, no aircraft, no storms, no obvious explanation for the tremendous noise that seems to emerge from thin air. Lake Seneca in New York has become famous for its regular Mistpoeffer activity, with locals dubbing them the Seneca guns. The Chesapeake Bay experiences similar phenomena called Barisal guns, named after a region in Bangladesh where identical sounds have terrorized residents since the 1800s. Belgium's coastal waters produce what residents call Mistpoeffers, the original Dutch term meaning fog belchers. Japan documents similar events as uminari, or sea roars, while Italy's coast experiences brontidi, or thunder-like sounds. Conventional explanations range from distant thunder reflecting off atmospheric layers to underground gas explosions or seismic activity. Some scientists propose that meteors exploding high in the atmosphere could create these delayed sonic signatures. Others suggest military testing or secret aircraft operations. More intriguing theories point to electromagnetic anomalies in these specific geographic locations. Certain researchers claim these areas sit above underground crystal formations or mineral deposits that could generate piezoelectric effects when subjected to tectonic pressure. The pattern of Mistpoeffer locations has caught attention. Many occur near major fault lines, underground cavern systems, or areas with unusual magnetic readings. Some investigators note that Mistpoeffer activity often increases before seismic events, suggesting these sounds might serve as natural earthquake prediction systems. The most exotic explanations venture into interdimensional territory. Some theorists propose that these booming sounds represent audible evidence of parallel realities briefly intersecting with our own dimension. The consistent reports across different cultures and centuries lend an eerie credibility to what might otherwise sound like pure fantasy. What remains undeniable is that these sounds continue to occur with startling regularity, witnessed by thousands of people who all describe remarkably similar experiences despite being separated by continents and decades. Lovelock Cave sits in the Nevada desert, about 20 miles south of the town that shares its name. This limestone cavern became the center of a decades-long debate after archaeologists began excavating it in the early 1900s. The Paiute tribe had long told stories about this place, describing a race of red-haired giants they called the Si-Taka who once lived in the area. According to their oral history, these beings stood 8 to 10 feet tall and were eventually driven into the cave by tribal warriors, where they met their end through fire and smoke. When miners first disturbed the cave in 1911, they found it packed with ancient artifacts and human remains. The archaeological team led by Llewellyn Loud documented thousands of items including sandals, baskets, and fishing nets preserved by the dry cave environment. But it was the human remains that sparked the real controversy. Reports emerged of unusually large skeletons with reddish hair still clinging to the skulls. One skeleton allegedly measured 8 feet 2 inches tall, while another was said to reach nearly 10 feet. The Humboldt Museum in Nevada claims to house some of these remains, though independent verification has proven difficult. Several of the largest specimens reportedly disappeared from collections over the years, fueling claims of a deliberate cover-up by academic institutions. Modern DNA analysis of hair samples from the cave has shown them to be from people of European or Middle Eastern descent rather than Native American, adding another layer to the mystery of who these ancient inhabitants actually were. Mars is on Earth suggests that every stunning image and video from the Red Planet has never actually left our home world. This theory claims that space agencies have been filming all Mars rover footage and surface photography right here on Earth, using remote terrestrial locations that closely mimic the Martian landscape. The centerpiece of this theory focuses on Devon Island in the Canadian Arctic, a barren 24-kilometer-wide impact crater that conspiracy theorists argue serves as NASA's primary Mars filming location. The island's rust-colored soil, rocky terrain, and complete absence of vegetation create an almost perfect stand-in for Mars surface conditions. Temperature records show Devon Island regularly reaches minus 40 degrees Celsius, matching the extreme cold that Mars rovers supposedly endure. Believers point to specific geological formations captured in official Mars photographs that allegedly match landmarks found in terrestrial desert locations across Arizona, Utah, and Chile's Atacama Desert. They claim that careful analysis reveals identical rock formations, sand patterns, and even similar lighting conditions that would be impossible to replicate if the images were truly taken 91 million kilometers away. The theory extends to the Mars rover missions themselves, suggesting that Curiosity, Perseverance, and previous rovers have never left specially constructed testing facilities on Earth. Proponents note that NASA openly conducts rover testing in these same desert locations, making it convenient to simply continue filming there while claiming the footage comes from Mars. Some versions of this theory point to alleged anomalies in Mars imagery, including what appears to be a small rodent or lizard scurrying across the Martian surface in a 2012 Curiosity rover photograph. Rather than explaining this as a photographic artifact, believers argue it proves the rover was actually operating in an Earth-based desert environment where such creatures naturally exist. The theory gains additional traction from the fact that Mars mission communications allegedly experienced 20-minute delays due to interplanetary distance, making real-time verification of rover activities impossible for outside observers. Anima telluris refers to the ancient belief that Earth possesses a literal soul capable of generating magnetic consciousness throughout the planet. This concept traces back to Johannes Kepler and William Gilbert in the early 1600s, when leading scientists seriously proposed that our planet rotated due to its own magnetic intelligence. Gilbert specifically argued that Earth's rotation occurred because, with her astral magnetic mind, she moves in a circle to avoid being scorched by the sun. The theory emerged from observations of lodestones, naturally magnetized rocks that seemed to display magnetic intelligence as they drew iron objects toward them. Early researchers couldn't explain magnetic attraction through purely mechanical means, leading them to conclude that magnets possessed souls that could recognize and attract compatible materials. Modern believers in Anima telluris expand this concept into contemporary theories about planetary consciousness. They describe a new magnetism occurring on Earth today, an increased spiritual pull from higher dimensions that's supposedly transforming the planet's consciousness and preparing humanity for a shift to soul-level awareness. Some theorists propose that Earth is developing an integrated consciousness through the merger of human thought with the planet's own magnetic field, creating what they call planetary consciousness. The theory connects to electromagnetic theories of consciousness, which suggest that awareness emerges from specific patterns in electromagnetic fields rather than purely from neural activity. Proponents claim that since magnetic fields now permeate galaxy clusters spanning millions of light years, consciousness itself might be a fundamental electromagnetic property of the universe. This connects to panpsychist philosophy, which holds that consciousness exists throughout all matter, an idea that traces back to ancient Greek philosophers like Thales, who believed magnets must carry souls because they could move iron. According to Anima telluris believers, we're simply rediscovering what our ancestors understood about the Earth's magnetic soul. Dogboy Arkansas refers to Gerald Floyd Bettis, a man whose disturbing actions in the small town of Quitman, Arkansas, turned him into both a true crime case and a lasting urban legend. Born in 1954 to Floyd and Aline Bettis, Gerald earned his sinister nickname through his childhood habit of collecting stray cats and dogs. But he wasn't running an animal shelter. Neighbors reported hearing the animals cry out from his property as he subjected them to prolonged cruelty. Local resident Mary Nell Hoer-Verde recalled being able to hear the animals from her home, describing Gerald as vicious and cruel even as a young boy. The Bettis family lived in a large house at 65 Mulberry Street, one of Quitman's finer homes built in the 1890s. As Gerald grew older, his violence escalated from animals to human victims. His targets were the people closest to him, his own parents. Gerald imprisoned Floyd and Aline Bettis in their own home, forcing them to live in the attic for extended periods. The exact duration remains unclear because his mother's mental state deteriorated severely from the years of abuse. Gerald's father eventually died after falling down the stairs, breaking his neck. Locals believe Gerald pushed him, though this was never proven in court. The horrific situation only came to light when authorities discovered Floyd Bettis's body and rescued his wife. Gerald had built a sunroom addition to grow plants, including marijuana, which ultimately led to his arrest in the late 1980s. He died of a drug overdose in prison in May 1988 at age 34. The story doesn't end with Gerald's death. The house at 65 Mulberry Street has become a focal point for paranormal investigators. Residents have reported chairs rocking by themselves, stacks of lumber standing upright without support, and toilets flushing on their own. Visitors describe feeling overwhelming sadness and unease upon entering the property. An apparition of a large man in a brown jacket and bow tie has been spotted watching from upper floor windows. During one investigation, a medium claimed Gerald cursed them and demanded they leave his house. The Central Arkansas Society for Paranormal Research has documented numerous incidents at the location, which remains a private residence to this day. The Sadam Hussein remote viewing project centers on claims that the Iraqi dictator established his own psychic espionage program during the 1980s and 1990s, mirroring similar efforts by American and Soviet intelligence agencies. Remote viewing involves trained individuals attempting to perceive and describe distant locations, objects, or events using only their mind, without any conventional sensory input. Practitioners claim they can sketch buildings they've never seen, identify hidden military installations, or even locate missing persons across thousands of kilometers. Documents surfaced after the 2003 invasion suggesting Hussein recruited psychics and mystics from across the Middle East to form what intelligence analysts dubbed Unit 999. This secretive division allegedly operated from a compound in Baghdad, where selected individuals underwent intensive training to spy on enemy positions, locate hidden weapons caches, and even attempt to influence the minds of foreign leaders. The program reportedly employed former university professors, Sufi mystics, and individuals claiming natural psychic abilities. Training sessions involved meditation techniques borrowed from Islamic mysticism, combined with systematic target practice against known locations. Participants would sit in darkened rooms, entering trance-like states while attempting to mentally visit American military bases or Israeli government facilities. One particularly detailed account describes a session where remote viewers claimed to observe the interior layout of a classified Pentagon meeting room, providing sketches that allegedly matched actual floor plans. Another case involved attempts to psychically locate American pilots shot down during Operation Desert Storm. The project's existence gained credibility when former Iraqi intelligence officers confirmed its operations during post-war interrogations. Several officers described witnessing successful remote viewing demonstrations, including one incident where a psychic accurately described the contents of a sealed envelope containing satellite photographs of Iranian nuclear facilities. Whether these accounts represent genuine psychic phenomena, elaborate psychological warfare, or simple coincidence remains hotly debated among intelligence researchers and paranormal investigators. Blobsquatchery refers to the curious pattern that virtually every piece of Bigfoot evidence suffers from the same fatal flaw: extreme blurriness that renders the subject into an indistinct dark blob. This phenomenon has spawned theories that go far beyond simple camera shake or poor lighting conditions. The term emerged from cryptozoology communities frustrated by decades of fuzzy footage, starting with the famous Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967. Despite advances in camera technology from grainy film to high-definition digital, alleged Sasquatch encounters continue producing the same blob-like imagery. Even with millions of people now carrying smartphones capable of recording in 4K resolution, the quality of Bigfoot evidence remains remarkably consistent in its lack of clarity. Some researchers propose that Sasquatch possesses natural camouflage abilities that interfere with recording equipment. They point to reports from witnesses who claim they saw the creature clearly with their naked eyes, only to find their cameras captured nothing but dark, shapeless forms against the forest backdrop. Others suggest a more deliberate explanation, that clearer footage exists, but gets suppressed or discredited by unknown parties with interests in keeping Bigfoot's existence unconfirmed. They note how quickly viral Bigfoot videos get debunked or explained away, while the obviously fake ones tend to circulate freely. The electromagnetic interference theory proposes that Sasquatch generates some form of natural field that disrupts electronic devices, explaining both the poor image quality and the frequent reports of cameras malfunctioning during encounters. Advocates cite the documented effects of infrasound on both human perception and electronic equipment. Blobsquatchery has become shorthand for questioning why, in an age of crystal-clear wildlife photography, this particular cryptid remains stubbornly elusive to proper documentation. The Cassiopaean experiment centers on a decades-long channeling operation that claims to receive communications from beings in the Cassiopeia constellation. Beginning in the 1990s, researcher Laura Knight-Jadczyk and her group started conducting regular sessions using a modified Ouija board to supposedly contact these entities, who identify themselves as sixth-density beings from our future. These communications have produced thousands of pages of transcripts covering topics that range from alternate ancient history to hyperdimensional physics. The Cassiopaeans describe reality as consisting of 7 density levels, with most humans currently existing at 3rd density, while 4th density beings manipulate events from behind the scenes. According to these sessions, Earth operates on a 300,000-year cycle where advanced civilizations rise and fall due to catastrophic events triggered by the approach of our solar system's companion star. The entities claim that previous cycles saw the destruction of Atlantis and other advanced societies, with humanity repeatedly losing technological and spiritual knowledge. The channeled material includes specific predictions about future Earth changes, detailed accounts of alien interactions with human governments, and explanations of how hyperdimensional beings feed off human emotional energy. Knight-Jadczyk has built an entire research network around these communications, publishing books and maintaining websites that analyze current events through the lens of Cassiopaean teachings. Sessions typically involve multiple participants using a planchette on a board with letters, with participants claiming their conscious minds don't control the spelling out of responses. The entities allegedly provide information that participants couldn't have known beforehand, including complex scientific concepts and historical details that later researchers verify through independent sources. The material warns about an approaching realm border crossing that will separate humans into different density levels based on their spiritual development and knowledge acquisition. This entry suggests that alien abduction experiences stem from repressed memories of birth trauma or medical procedures involving pregnancy termination. The theory emerged from several psychologists and researchers in the 1980s and 1990s who noticed striking parallels between abduction accounts and early life medical trauma. Dr. Alvin Lawson conducted experiments in the late 1970s where he hypnotized people who had never claimed abduction experiences. Under hypnosis, these subjects described remarkably similar scenarios to actual abductees, being taken to sterile rooms, examined by beings with large eyes, and subjected to medical procedures. Lawson theorized these universal elements reflected birth memories stored in the unconscious mind. The theory points to specific details that appear in both birth experiences and abduction reports. Abductees frequently describe being pulled through tunnels toward bright lights, then emerging into sterile environments filled with figures in medical garments. They report being placed on tables, having instruments inserted into their bodies, and experiencing a mixture of fear and helplessness. The iconic image of gray aliens with oversized heads and large black eyes allegedly mirrors a newborn's perspective of medical personnel wearing surgical masks and caps. Proponents of this interpretation note that many abductees report reproductive-focused examinations, including the removal of eggs or sperm, artificial insemination procedures, or encounters with hybrid babies. These elements could represent buried memories of pregnancy-related medical interventions or the complex emotions surrounding pregnancy loss. Dr. David Jacobs and other abduction researchers strongly rejected this interpretation, arguing that the consistency of abduction accounts across different cultures and backgrounds proves their literal truth. However, the birth trauma theory gained support from therapists working with recovered memory techniques, though this field itself became highly controversial during the same time period. The theory suggests that what people interpret as alien contact might actually be the mind's way of processing humanity's most universal yet forgotten experience, the trauma of being born. The Wreck of the Titan presents one of history's most unsettling cases of fiction, seemingly predicting reality with impossible precision. In 1898, author Morgan Robertson published a novella called Futility, featuring a massive passenger ship named the Titan. This fictional vessel was described as the largest ship ever built, nearly unsinkable, carrying the wealthy elite of society across the North Atlantic. The Titan struck an iceberg on a cold April night and sank with massive loss of life due to insufficient lifeboats. 14 years later, the RMS Titanic would follow this exact script with chilling accuracy. Robertson's fictional Titan measured 800 feet long, while the real Titanic stretched 882 feet. Both ships were described as practically unsinkable, and both were the largest vessels of their respective times. The Titan carried 3,000 passengers, the Titanic over 2,000. Both ships maintained similar speeds of around 25 knots when they struck their icebergs. The most disturbing parallel involves the lifeboats. Robertson's Titan carried just 24 lifeboats for 3,000 passengers, while the Titanic carried 20 for over 2,000 souls. Both disasters occurred in April, both in the North Atlantic, both involving impacts with icebergs on the starboard side. Robertson wasn't just any random writer spinning tales. He spent years working on merchant vessels and understood ship design, maritime routes, and ocean conditions intimately. His technical knowledge of shipbuilding was extensive, leading some to question whether his fiction was based on insider information about planned vessel construction. The author himself seemed shaken by the parallels, later revising his story and changing the title to The Wreck of the Titan after the real disaster occurred. Critics argue the similarities represent educated speculation from someone familiar with maritime trends rather than supernatural foresight. Large ships were getting bigger, the North Atlantic route was standard, and icebergs were known hazards. But the precision of details continues to disturb readers over a century later. This theory suggests that child beauty pageant contestant JonBenet-Ramsey never actually died in 1996, but instead grew up to become pop superstar Katy Perry. Believers point to striking facial similarities between the 6-year-old pageant queen and the California-born singer. They highlight matching eyebrow shapes, similar bone structure, and what they describe as identical eye formations. Side-by-side photo comparisons circulated widely across social media platforms, with some claiming the resemblance is too strong to be coincidental. The theory gained momentum when internet sleuths discovered that both families have connections to the Christian music industry. JonBenet's father, John Ramsey, worked in the computer business but had ties to religious circles, while Katy Perry's parents, Mary and Keith Hudson, were traveling Pentecostal ministers who released their own Christian albums. Proponents of this theory argue that the Ramsey family, devastated by the media circus surrounding their daughter's case, orchestrated an elaborate cover-up. They claim JonBenet was secretly relocated and given a new identity, eventually emerging as Catherine Elizabeth Hudson in Santa Barbara, California. The timeline presents immediate problems for this theory. Katy Perry was already performing gospel music under her real name in the early 2000s, releasing a Christian album in 2001. Meanwhile, JonBenet-Ramsey's case remained active in Boulder, Colorado, with DNA evidence and ongoing investigations that would be difficult to fabricate entirely. YouTube videos analyzing facial recognition software and bone structure measurements have accumulated hundreds of thousands of views. Some creators claim that certain childhood photos of Katy Perry appear to show the same distinctive features that made JonBenet famous in pageant circuits. Thought reform totalism describes a systematic approach to reshaping human consciousness that goes far beyond simple propaganda or persuasion. Psychiatrist Robert J. Lifton identified this phenomenon after studying American prisoners of war who returned from Chinese communist camps during the Korean War, many displaying dramatically altered beliefs and personalities. Lifton outlined 8 specific criteria that define this process. Milieu control involves controlling every aspect of a person's environment and information intake. Sacred science presents the group's doctrine as both scientifically accurate and spiritually meaningful, making it impossible to question without appearing both ignorant and immoral. The demand for purity creates impossible standards that keep members constantly striving and never satisfied with their spiritual or ideological development. Confession rituals break down individual psychological barriers while creating detailed records of personal vulnerabilities. Loading the language replaces normal vocabulary with specialized terms that reshape how members think about reality itself. Doctrine over person subordinates individual experience to group teachings, even when personal experience contradicts official beliefs. The dispensing of existence determines who deserves to continue living based on their acceptance of group ideology. Finally, the mystical manipulation creates seemingly spontaneous spiritual experiences that are actually carefully orchestrated by leadership. These techniques have appeared across diverse settings from Maoist re-education centers to religious movements like the Unification Church and Scientology. Former members describe a gradual process where their capacity for independent thought systematically diminished without their awareness. What makes this particularly unsettling is how these methods can be implemented incrementally within seemingly normal organizations, making the transition from free thinking to controlled consciousness almost imperceptible to those experiencing it. Rhizomes represent a philosophical framework that reveals how power and influence truly operate beneath the surface of society. French philosophers Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari developed this concept in 1980, drawing from underground root systems that spread horizontally without any central command structure. Unlike traditional organizations that resemble trees with clear hierarchies branching from a single trunk, rhizomatic networks function more like the root systems of bamboo or ginger plants. These systems spread in every direction underground, connecting any point to any other point without requiring approval from some central authority. You can cut one section, and the network continues growing from countless other nodes. This concept fundamentally challenges how we understand secret societies and shadow networks. Rather than imagining a single puppet master at the top of a pyramid pulling all the strings, rhizomatic thinking suggests that control systems operate through distributed networks where influence flows in multiple directions simultaneously. The internet serves as the most obvious example of rhizomatic structure in action. Information spreads horizontally between users, creating connections that bypass traditional gatekeepers. When authorities shut down one website or platform, the network regenerates elsewhere through different nodes and pathways. Intelligence agencies, financial networks, and underground movements all demonstrate rhizomatic properties. They lack single points of failure because their power emerges from the connections between distributed elements rather than from centralized command. Each individual node may seem insignificant, but together they form resilient webs of influence that can adapt and survive even when portions are exposed or eliminated. This framework explains why traditional approaches to understanding conspiracy often fail. Investigators search for the head of the snake, but rhizomatic networks have no head to cut off. The power lies in the connections themselves, constantly shifting and reforming through pathways that remain largely invisible to outside observers. The rhizomatic model suggests that modern control operates through what appears to be chaos, but actually represents a sophisticated form of distributed organization that grows stronger through its apparent lack of structure. Poverty Point Sun Temple centers on claims that the ancient earthwork complex in Louisiana contains sophisticated solar observatory structures that mainstream archaeology refuses to acknowledge. Located near the Mississippi River, Poverty Point consists of 6 concentric semicircular ridges and several large mounds built between 1700 and 1100 BCE. The conspiracy focuses on specific alignments between these earthworks and solar events throughout the year. Researchers outside traditional academic circles point to the precise positioning of Mound A, which stands 72 feet tall and aligns exactly with the summer solstice sunrise when viewed from the center of the ridge system. They argue this demonstrates astronomical knowledge far beyond what hunter-gatherer societies supposedly possessed 3,000 years ago. The theory gains traction from measurements showing that multiple sightlines from various points within the complex correspond to solar positions during equinoxes and solstices. Engineer Clarence Webb documented these alignments in the 1970s, but his findings were largely dismissed by mainstream archaeologists who preferred explanations focused on trade and ceremony rather than advanced astronomical calculation. Proponents highlight the mathematical precision required to construct the semicircular ridges, each spaced exactly 150 feet apart across a mile-wide area. They calculate that achieving such accuracy without modern surveying tools would require understanding of complex geometry and celestial mechanics. The ridges themselves form what some describe as an ancient amphitheater designed to track solar movements across seasons. From the center point, observers could theoretically predict seasonal changes, agricultural timing, and ceremonial dates with remarkable precision. Critics of mainstream interpretation note that Poverty Point's builders moved an estimated 1 million cubic yards of earth without wheels, beasts of burden, or metal tools. This massive undertaking suggests organizational capabilities and knowledge systems that challenge conventional timelines of North American indigenous development. The Sun Temple theory extends beyond simple solar observation to propose that Poverty Point functioned as a sophisticated calendar system and astronomical computer encoded in earthwork form for permanent reference across generations. Silencioso zoneros refers to the tourist guides and conspiracy enthusiasts who have built an entire mythology around Mexico's Zone of Silence, a 50-kilometer stretch of desert in the Mapimi Biosphere Reserve where radio signals allegedly fail to function. The legend began in 1970 when a United States military missile fired from White Sands went dramatically off course, traveling 400 miles south to crash directly into this remote Mexican desert. The American military quietly arrived to retrieve their wayward Athena rocket, pulling it from the sand after 28 days and removing the railroad tracks they had built for the operation. Local workers recognized an opportunity when they saw one. Rather than let this bizarre incident fade into history, they began promoting the crash site as a location where electromagnetic forces create supernatural phenomena. These guides, known as zoneros or silenciosos, claimed the missile went astray because underground magnetite deposits and meteorite debris create magnetic fields so powerful that compasses spin wildly and radio transmissions become impossible. The zoneros developed increasingly elaborate stories to draw visitors to their desert tours. They reported sightings of floating orbs, encounters with tall blonde aliens who spoke perfect Spanish, and discoveries of unusual plants and animals with genetic mutations. Some claim the area shares the same latitude as the Egyptian pyramids and Bermuda Triangle, making it part of a global network of energy portals where extraterrestrial visitors return to conduct their research. What makes this conspiracy particularly interesting is how thoroughly it has been debunked by actual scientists working in the area. Andrea Kaus, who wrote her doctoral dissertation on the Mapimi Biosphere Reserve, noted that neither she nor any researchers experienced problems with radios or compasses during their extensive fieldwork in the zone. The Mexican government established the area as a protected biosphere reserve in 1977, complete with a research station studying the legitimate ecological wonders of this ancient seabed. The zoneros have become something of a problem for legitimate research efforts. They collect fossils and artifacts from the protected area while leaving behind trash, and their persistent promotion of alien theories overshadows the genuine scientific work being conducted there. Local residents find the whole phenomenon rather amusing, with one rancher famously telling a carload of zonero customers that they would find the zone when they saw Martians jumping across the road. The Silencioso zoneros represent a fascinating case study in how a mundane military accident can evolve into an elaborate tourist attraction built entirely on fabricated supernatural claims. The Essenes were a mysterious Jewish sect that disappeared from history around the 1st century, but their influence may have been far greater than most realize. These desert-dwelling communities practiced extreme asceticism and claimed to possess secret knowledge passed down through generations. Living primarily near the Dead Sea, they followed strict purity rituals that included daily baptisms and communal meals that outsiders were forbidden to witness. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran in 1947 revealed texts that many scholars believe belonged to an Essene community. These scrolls contained not just biblical manuscripts, but detailed descriptions of apocalyptic visions, mystical practices, and what they called the War of the Sons of Light against the Sons of Darkness. What makes the Essenes particularly intriguing is their apparent knowledge of events that wouldn't occur for decades. Some of their texts describe a teacher of righteousness who would suffer persecution, which has led researchers to wonder if they somehow predicted the life of Jesus. The Jewish historian Josephus wrote that Essenes could foretell the future with remarkable accuracy. He documented specific cases where Essene prophets correctly predicted the deaths of kings and the outcomes of battles. According to Josephus, an Essene named Judas successfully predicted that Antigonus would die at Strato's tower, specifying both the location and timing. The sect practiced what they called sacred therapeutics, healing methods that allegedly went far beyond the medical knowledge of their time. Ancient sources describe Essene who could heal incurable diseases and extend human lifespans significantly beyond normal expectations. Perhaps most mysteriously, the Essenes claimed to guard the true name of God and possessed what they called the Book of the Watchers, texts that supposedly contain knowledge given to humanity by divine beings before a great catastrophe. After the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE, the Essenes vanished completely from historical records, leading some to suggest they didn't disappear, but simply went deeper underground. Chupacabra-bune represents a lesser-known connection between the famous blood-drinking cryptid and an ancient demonic entity from medieval grimoires. This theory suggests that chupacabra sightings aren't random animal encounters, but rather manifestations summoned through specific occult practices involving Bune, the 26th demon listed in the Ars Goetia. Bune, traditionally depicted as a three-headed dragon capable of moving corpses and granting wealth, allegedly requires blood offerings to maintain physical presence in our realm. Practitioners claim that improper summoning rituals don't just fail to bring forth Bune directly, but instead create these hybrid manifestations that retain the demon's thirst for blood while taking on a more bestial physical form. The connection gained traction after Puerto Rican occultist Maria Esperanza documented her research in 1996, just 1 year after the first major chupacabra reports emerged on the island. Esperanza noted that several witnesses described the creature's eyes as showing an unsettling intelligence far beyond what any unknown animal should possess. She pointed to specific behavioral patterns that aligned with historical accounts of Bune's appearances. The creature's preference for goats mirrors Bune's association with pastoral wealth and livestock. More tellingly, multiple witnesses reported finding strange symbols carved into trees near attack sites, symbols that match sigils used in Bune, summoning rituals dating back to the 1400s. The theory gained unexpected support when cryptozoologist Miguel Santos analyzed 17 separate chupacabra encounters across Mexico and found that 12 occurred within 5 kilometers of properties where previous owners had documented histories of practicing ceremonial magic. Santos noted that this statistical clustering couldn't be explained by random wildlife behavior. Modern believers point to the creature's apparent ability to vanish without leaving tracks, a trait they argue is more supernatural than biological. They claim this explains why no chupacabra corpse has ever been definitively recovered, despite hundreds of reported sightings across Latin America and the southern United States. The most dedicated researchers maintain detailed maps correlating chupacabra appearances with lunar cycles and specific dates mentioned in demonological texts, suggesting these manifestations follow predictable patterns tied to otherworldly influences rather than natural animal behavior. The Grey Goblin of King Charles XII refers to a paranormal entity documented in Albert Rosales' Humanoid Encounters collection and Brad Steiger's Real Ghosts and Restless Spirits. This small gray creature allegedly served as a supernatural military advisor to Sweden's warrior king during the early 1700s. Charles inherited the Swedish throne at just 15 years old in 1697, immediately facing a triple alliance of Denmark, Russia, and Poland. The young king would go on to lead some of the most audacious military campaigns in European history, often making tactical decisions that baffled his experienced generals. According to the accounts, a diminutive gray humanoid would materialize before the king during crucial moments, whispering strategic advice and revealing future battle outcomes. The goblin reportedly appeared most frequently during Charles's legendary march into Russia, where his army of 44,000 men achieved impossible victories against forces twice their size. The creature's prophetic abilities allegedly guided the king through early triumphs like the Battle of Holocene, where Swedish forces routed a massive Russian army. However, the supernatural guidance seemed to fail catastrophically at Poltava in 1709. Charles had been wounded before the battle and could not take direct command, leading to a devastating defeat that marked the beginning of Sweden's imperial decline. Some versions suggest the Grey Goblin vanished entirely after this disaster, abandoning the king to 9 years of exile in the Ottoman Empire. The entity's final alleged appearance came during Charles's assault on Norway in 1718. Witnesses claimed the goblin warned of imminent danger, but the king ignored the supernatural counsel. Days later, Charles died mysteriously at the siege of Frederikston, struck by a projectile that pierced his skull. His death remains unexplained to this day, with theories ranging from enemy fire to assassination by his own frustrated officers. The Grey Goblin accounts raise questions about the source of Charles's early military genius, and whether supernatural forces influenced one of history's most enigmatic warrior kings. Hoer-Verde is a puzzling mass disappearance in South American history. On February 5, 1923, visitors arrived at this small Brazilian settlement near the jungle to find all 600 residents had vanished without a trace. The mystery began when neighboring villagers noticed their regular trade shipments from Hoer-Verde had stopped arriving. When concerned traders ventured to investigate, they discovered an entirely abandoned settlement. Houses stood intact with meals still cooking on stoves, laundry hanging on lines, and personal belongings scattered throughout homes as if residents had simply stepped away moments before. The most chilling discovery came inside the local schoolhouse, where someone had scrawled, "There is no salvation," across a classroom chalkboard in chalk. Investigators also found several recently fired weapons, though no signs of struggle or violence appeared anywhere else in the village. Brazilian authorities dispatched a full investigation team accompanied by military personnel the following morning. After documenting the scene, the government abruptly classified all findings and sealed the case from public scrutiny within days. This rapid suppression has fueled decades of speculation about what investigators actually uncovered. Multiple theories attempt to explain the disappearance. Some point to Brazil's political turmoil during the early 1920s, suggesting revolutionary forces relocated the population. However, no major revolts occurred in 1923, with documented uprisings happening in 1922 and 1924 instead. More exotic explanations propose interdimensional portals or extraterrestrial intervention transported the entire population elsewhere. The black hole theory suggests a temporary gravitational anomaly consumed everyone, though such an event would have affected far more than a single village. The case gains additional intrigue from its documentation challenges. No official Brazilian records acknowledge Hoer-Verde's existence, and the town's name itself presents linguistic problems. Hoer appears to be Dutch rather than Portuguese, creating questions about the settlement's actual origins and identity. Some researchers trace the story's emergence to foreign media reports, particularly Russian publications, raising possibilities of misinformation or deliberate fabrication during politically tense international periods. The Bradbury Building stands as one of downtown Los Angeles' most peculiar architectural mysteries, hiding secrets that go far beyond its stunning wrought iron facade. Built in 1893, this 5-story office building owes its existence to what some claim was supernatural intervention. George Wyman, a mere draftsman with no formal architectural training, supposedly received the building's intricate design through a Ouija board session. The spirit allegedly told him to take the commission, promising it would make his reputation. Whether guided by otherworldly forces or not, Wyman created something extraordinary. The building's interior features a soaring glass atrium, ornate birdcage elevators, and marble staircases that seem to spiral endlessly upward. Hollywood insiders point to the building's uncanny ability to attract film productions, particularly those dealing with dystopian futures and dark secrets. Blade Runner, 500. Days of Summer, and countless noir films have used its interiors. Some suggest this isn't coincidence but design, that the building's architecture naturally channels certain energies that filmmakers unconsciously recognize. The conspiracy deepens when examining the building's tenant history. Multiple entertainment industry figures, private investigators, and what locals describe as unusual businesses have occupied its offices over the decades. Maintenance workers report finding sealed rooms and altered floor plans that don't match the original blueprints. Several tenants have mentioned hearing footsteps and voices in the central court during off hours when the building should be empty. The building's location in downtown LA places it at the heart of several overlapping theories about Hollywood's power structure and the entertainment industry's hidden networks. The Cotton Hollow Giant refers to a documented sighting from the summer of 1898 that appeared in Connecticut's Naugatuck Daily News. This case stands out because it involves multiple witnesses, physical evidence, and corroborating testimony from local residents who had encountered the creature before. 4 men from Danbury were walking home through the wooded area known as Cotton Hollow after visiting friends late one night. Jerry Wilson was leading the group when a massive figure suddenly sprang up from the underbrush ahead of them. The creature towered over the men, standing at least twice their height, and called out in a booming voice asking Wilson how far it was to the next town. Terrified, Wilson managed to stammer back that it was about 3 miles before the giant disappeared into the dark forest. The physical evidence discovered the following day adds credibility to their account. The men returned to Cotton Hollow and found enormous footprints pressed into the soft soil, measuring 18 inches long and 5.5 inches wide. Local residents confirmed they had seen this same giant wandering the neighborhood on several occasions, describing him as standing 9 feet tall and weighing approximately 500 pounds. What makes this case particularly intriguing is how it fits into Connecticut's broader history of giant encounters. The state is already home to the Sleeping Giant Ridge in Hamden, which according to Algonquian tradition is the petrified body of the deity Hobomok. This suggests the Cotton Hollow sighting wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of giant encounters in the region that spans both documented history and indigenous folklore. The timing also coincides with the era of other famous giant discoveries across America, including the Cardiff giant hoax of 1869. However, unlike manufactured specimens, the Cotton Hollow Giant was a living, breathing entity that interacted with witnesses and left behind trackable evidence of its presence.